Certainly.
Look at that.
Hell!
No, God! No, God, please, no! No! No!
Stop the prime time, bitch!
Pull the string! Pull the string!
Oh my. Look, Freddy, I don't, the board doesn't really like that bitch you threw in there. I understand that you're a dream invading serial killer slash child abductor, but you really need to clean up your language. We're gonna sell this to America in general. Just drop the bitch act. Do it, say it too much. That's my vocal warm-up, was an impression of the executive board members of New Line Cinema, or whoever it was that perpetrated the many Nightmare on Elm Street sequels upon the American populace. They're fine, I guess, but I digress. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Luckton. This is Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclasts, the podcast. Round 2 of Halloween. I had several options. I just did a lot of research and a lot of writing leading up to this point over several topics. And if nothing else, what I don't get out for Halloween, like I said, I'd probably do spooky season all the way to the end of the year, because I would forever live in this moment, this time of the year, if I could, because it's my favorite time of year. So yeah, I'm kind of just, I guess I'm spoiled for choice, but seeing as how the first outing covering the homunculus and some of its sordid history was our first outing, I kind of want to go a different route. So today, this episode, we're going to cover a gentleman by the name, gentleman's probably stretching it, a feller by the name of Sigvard Thurneman, and an incident known as the Magic Circle Murders. Now, there are places in the world where crime and the occult seem to overlap, and not by accident, but by design, where violence becomes ritual and murder becomes a form of quote-unquote transcendence in certain people's eyes. I touched on some of this in the previous Occult Crime Atlas episodes, and this is going to be something very much in that same vein. In 1930 Sweden, a young man named Sigvard Thurneman gathered a small circle of loyal followers, men who would rob, kidnap, and kill at his command. They called themselves the Sala Gang. The newspapers called them monsters. But to Thurneman, something more, something sacred. He claimed to be acting under higher instruction. He was a disciple of a hidden master who taught him that death was merely a change in state, and that killing was not murder, but transformation. Well, a fancy lad. That's who we're dealing with. That by freeing a soul from its body, one could accumulate power. When police finally caught up with the gang, they found not only stolen money and bodies, but notebooks filled with symbols, coded references, and invocations that seemed to belong to another world entirely. Tonight we descend into that world, right into it. The Shadow Realm, where metaphysics meets murder. A place where the fifth dimension is not theory, but a weapon, and where enlightenment can come at the edge of a blade. Watch out. Sweden, winter of 1936, a thin mist rolls across the mining town of Sala. Quiet, working class, respectable types. But beneath the veneer of Lutheran order, something dark and ancient was astirring. Over 6 years, a string of strange deaths haunted this part of Sweden. Farmers found murdered in their barns, shopkeepers strangled with no clear motive. Police chalked it up to robberies gone wrong. But there was a pattern. Silence, ritual precision, and the lingering odor of something stinky, something burnt. Incense, or perhaps, maybe, Henbrained. When the truth finally came to light, the newspapers screamed of the Magic Circle murders. At the center stood one man, Sigvard Thurneman, a soft-spoken intellectual who believed he could kill his way to spiritual perfection. Sigvard Thurneman wasn't always a murderer, no. One time, upon a time, he was a baby. He was born in Sala in 1908, shy, withdrawn, sickly. I can relate. As a child, he'd drift into long silences, claiming to see quote-unquote light forms around people. His father was a local craftsman, his mother a devout woman, but even she admitted that the boy seemed to live in another world. The boy ain't right. As a teenager, Thurneman became obsessed with Eastern mysticism, particularly Hindu concepts of reincarnation and karma. He studied Sanskrit texts and translation, fascinated by the idea that the soul could evolve through cycles of death and rebirth. But what began as a spiritual curiosity would soon twist into something much darker. In 1924, at 16 years old, Thurneman met Carl Anderson, Carl with a K, a Danish man, claiming to be a spiritual adept, a magician of sorts, if you will. Anderson told him that he could leave his body at will. He spoke of ancient brotherhoods, one called Den Magiska Cirkeln, or the Magic Circle. Through secret rites, its members sought power over life, death, and fate. Anderson became Thurneman's guru. They practiced transcommunication using drugs and visualization. Anderson would enter what he called astral projection, claiming to visit unseen realms. Thurneman became the perfect pupil, intelligent, obedient, and increasingly detached from normal morality. When Anderson returned to Denmark, Thurneman was left to continue the work alone. He said Anderson now contacted him telepathically, and slowly, the boundaries between meditation and possession began to blur. In 1927, Thurneman founded his own order, Den Magiska Cirkeln. Sound familiar? It should. It's also going to translate into the Magic Circle. To outsiders, it looked like a secret fraternity. 5 men in all, each sworn to secrecy. But the deeper one went, the clearer the theology became. Evil wasn't a sin. It was energy. Thurneman taught that all acts, even murder, could serve cosmic evolution if performed with pure intent. He believed the soul could rise by freeing itself from conventional morality, much like Nietzsche's Übermensch, but laced with Hindu metaphysics. Members were ranked in 5 degrees. To ascend, one had to prove mastery over fear, pain, and compassion. Eventually, the initiate would become free, quote-unquote, a magician untethered by human law. The circle performed rituals of trance involving inhaled fumes, narcotics, and total silence. They meditated on the Sanskrit syllable Aum, which Thurneman called, quote, the key to cosmic vibration, unquote. But their practices turned increasingly grim. Instead of candles, they began lighting small fires of straw and animal blood to, quote, feed the astral light, unquote. And Thurneman, always seeking the ultimate act of will, began whispering about the sacrifice of human life. The killings began quietly. 1930, Hedstrom Farm. A stable owner was found strangled with a cord. The killers took almost nothing but lingered long enough to start a small fire on the floorboards. Police called it senseless vandalism, but Thurneman told his inner circle it was a purification rite, burning away the victim's negative aura. Then came 1932, when a night watchman was ambushed and shot. The body was left face up under a sky the killers described as charged with power. They didn't run. They meditated nearby until dawn. In 1934, the group grew bolder. They robbed a courier of his payroll bag, killing him execution style. This time, the loot was secondary. When police found the scene, the victim's eyes had been covered with a white cloth, an old occult symbol meaning the soul has separated. Finally, in May 1936, Thurneman's arrogance doomed him. The circle targeted a local driver named Herbert Jansen, planning to steal his car. They shot him in cold blood, but witnesses caught sight of the getaway. Within days, one member cracked under questioning, confessing everything: the robberies, the killings, and the secret doctrine behind them. What police uncovered in Thurneman's writings was unlike anything Swedish criminology had seen. Meticulous notes on astral projection through narcotic assistance, sketches of ritual circles, and diaries describing the Great Plan, quote unquote, a series of killings to free the world from moral weakness. Thurneman's arrest became a national sensation. The Svenska Dagbladet called him, quote, the Wizard of Sala, unquote. Prosecutors described him as a modern witch cult leader, and his sect, of course, a modern witch cult. He remained eerily calm throughout his interrogation. When asked why he killed, he said, quote, to elevate myself, to learn control of fear, and to see death clearly, unquote. Psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia and declared him legally insane. But other doctors disagreed, noting his intelligence, discipline, and utter lack of delusion outside his chosen cosmology. It was ideology, not madness. In 1937, Thurneman was sentenced to indefinite psychiatric confinement rather than execution. He would spend nearly 30 years behind walls, mostly in the Satyr Asylum, writing, meditating, and practicing yoga. Nurses recalled that he rarely spoke, but radiated a, quote, unsettling calm, unquote, as if he had made peace with his crimes. In 1961, he was quietly released, deemed no longer dangerous. He vanished into civilian life, changing his name and working anonymously until his death in 1979. He never expressed remorse. His final known statement was, quote, one must do what is demanded by the higher self. Nothing else matters, unquote. Thurneman's spiritual system was a Frankenstein's monster stitched from Hindu scripture, theosophy, and his own feverish logic. At its center was the belief that the soul evolves through experience, not virtue. If good deeds strengthen the bright aspect of the soul, then evil deeds could strengthen the dark, and both were necessary for total enlightenment. He described humanity as divided between lesser men who follow conscience and adepts who act from cosmic necessity, quote unquote. Crime, he said, was a form of divine experiment, an act to test the limits of freedom. He reportedly used henbane, a hallucinogenic herb once associated with medieval witches. During rituals, he inhaled its fumes to induce trances where he claimed to meet beings of violet light? From these entities, he said, came, quote-unquote, orders, not moral commandments, but tasks to accelerate spiritual progress. In one note found after his arrest, he wrote, quote, I have no hatred, no anger, no compassion, only will. The universe feeds upon acts of will, unquote. Thurneman, the greatest sin wasn't murder, it was inaction. After the case faded, Den Magiska Cirkeln became a kind of occult legend. Post-war occultists whispered that Thurneman had glimpsed the left-hand path decades before Anton LaVey or the Temple of Set. Others drew parallels to the Order of Nine Angles, which also blended ritual murder and metaphysical ascent, though that group wouldn't emerge until the 1970s. Music journalists, especially those covering the Swedish black metal underground, later rediscovered the case. To them, Thurneman embodied something primal, the collision of Nordic mysticism, criminal will, and metaphysical revolt. A real-life philosopher of the abyss. Even today, fragments of his doctrine appear in online occult circles. Distorted quotes, misattributed rituals, and a fascination with the sacralization of crime. But few realize that it all began not in some castle laboratory or dark forest, but in a quiet mining town under a pale Swedish moon, with one man who thought he could reason with evil. When the police raided Thurneman's meeting place, they found a small metal brazier, its bottom blackened with ash. The forensic report noted it still smelled faintly of henbane and burnt wool. No one could determine what it had been used for. Perhaps it was just incense, or perhaps, in his mind, it was the engine of transformation, a gateway through which the soul could escape the weight of conscience. In the end, Thurneman left no followers, no formal order, no legacy beyond the myth. But in the half-light of history, he remains a warning that belief, once twisted, can justify anything, and that the darkest evil often hides behind the calmest eyes. The primary research into Thurneman's metaphysics, as chronicled by the Wolvericht book Manhunter, offers insight not only into the crimes themselves, but the esoteric framework behind them. Wolvericht emphasizes that many previous accounts treated Den Magiska Cirkeln as little more than a criminal gang with eccentric trappings. However, the circle's ideology was deeply structured. There were spiritual commands. Thurneman consistently stated that his acts were performed under orders from astral or spiritual forces. He saw himself as a tool of cosmic will, and the murders as obligations dictated by higher powers. There were black magic practices, ritual elements, including the inhalation of henbane smoke, ceremonial fires, and hypnotic trances. All were intended to connect members to unseen forces and condition them to obey commands without hesitation. There were psychological mechanisms. Wolferick notes that the circle's esotericism functioned both as spiritual doctrine and as a psychological overlay, enabling members to reconcile murder with a sense of higher purpose. The blend of Hindu metaphysics, tantric symbolism, and left-hand path principles created a rationale that overrode normal moral and legal boundaries. The use of symbolic tools, objects such as the magic ball, were more than curiosities. They served as focal points in ritual, a sort of crystal scrying device, representing the projection of the mind and the manipulation of unseen energies. There was hierarchical reinforcement. The circle's internal rankings and oaths reinforced obedience, and obedience was framed as a spiritual duty. Quote-unquote cosmic law rather than human law, making disobedience not merely a crime, but a spiritual failing. Wolverick further observed that Thurneman's approach anticipated many elements of later esoteric crime cults, the fusion of practical criminality and mystical purpose. In essence, the Magic Circle's ideology transformed criminal acts into ritualized exercises of will and spiritual experimentation. It is this duality, the convergence of practical crime and metaphysical justification, that makes Thurneman and Den Magiska Cirkeln unique in the annals of criminal and occult history. That's going to do it for this mini Halloween episode of Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclasts. I will include some sources in the show notes if anyone is interested in further exploring this particular topic. But Thurneman and the Magic Circle are one of the, let's say, unspoken influences within the realm of Nordic black metal meets occultism meets crime. Very under the radar group. So yeah, check the show notes for further links if you're interested in exploring further into this topic. And I will be back soon with another Halloween season mini episode. It's going to be it for Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclasts today. I'm Mike Lucht. Thank you very much for listening. See you on the next one.